Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Melanie Tana, and I love talking about stories and what I can learn from them. And typically I talk about books, and I wouldn't say what I normally do qualifies as a review, nor do I really give books ratings, even on Goodreads. It's just too tough of a decision, and it's hard for me to feel like I'm objective, even though no review is truly objective. And so, what I usually try to find in stories is what I can learn from each one that I read or watch for my writing, and sometimes as a person. But more so than with many books, this time I don't even feel like I can give you an accurate idea on whether you'll like it or not, aside from telling you why I love this book and why it was exactly the book I needed at this time in my life. And it's really too bad I don't own the physical copy yet. I know things have been a bit behind for them, but the book I'll be talking about today is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. So for those of you who don't know what Tress of the Emerald Sea is and why people don't have physical copies yet and what's so special about it, this is a book written by Brandon Sanderson. He is the author of books like the Mistborn trilogy and the Stormlight Archive, books that I love, worlds I love, and many of his books fit inside the Cosmere, his universe he's created. And this book does fit inside that. He wrote 4 secret books during the pandemic, which is so wild to me that instead of losing writing motivation, he had even more that he wrote. But this means that we get these books to enjoy. And Secret Project 1 just released at the very beginning of this year, 2023, and I loved it. I loved it so much, and for so many reasons, but I really do love this book beyond reasonable critique, so there's not really much I can tell you on whether it was good or bad. I thought it was good. So there will only be one spoiler, and that will be a little bit later in this video. I'll let you know before it comes out, and even then, it's very small, and a lot of people know this thing without having read the book yet, even though for me it was a fun surprise. I'm going to talk about some things that I learned from a writing standpoint without getting into the spoiler, and then the spoiler will kind of help me explain other things that I love. So anyway, and other things that I learned as well. So no spoilers here for those of you who are excited to read and haven't had the chance yet, or who don't have the opportunity to purchase books. Let me tell you some things I learned without ruining the story for you. So Tress sort of came up out of the idea of the Princess Bride, but in the sense that Princess Buttercup does stuff and is a bit more of an active character in her own life and in her own events. And it's a bit more YA. Some people I think were turned off by the concept of that, but I had no idea about any of that. I was very pleasantly not clued in too much about it until I had started reading. So here are just some little writing things that I learned without giving spoilers. Number 1 is, and this isn't necessarily from the writing itself, but from the fact that this book was written, and that is, for me personally, it's good to have special projects, secret projects, things that are near and dear to your heart that nobody else really has to play a part into or gets to. Obviously, those of us who are not published would love to have a team of people encouraging us and giving us deadlines and helping us get paid to do what we love. I would really love that. But the existence of this book kind of makes me think, like, I need to have things that are special to me, with stories that I care about just because I want to write them. And deadlines and everything are important, but don't forget to enjoy it, I think, is kind of my thing here. And I think you really enjoyed this, and so did I. Something really special can be born out of some kind of project like this. And sometimes writing something just for yourself is the healthiest thing that you can do as a creator, or any kind of creation that you're making, especially if you're used to selling your work. It's kind of nice to have something you don't have to market or make like profitable. And I think he still managed to share it with us, but I liked that it was a special secret thing for him and for his wife. I think that's really cool. One thing I admire about this book is that Sanderson really took the time, and he always does, I think, but he really took the time to set up the twists from the beginning, little turns and things, and even just events that happen. It doesn't feel really out of the blue. I felt like I had a pretty clear idea of, like, I didn't know what was going to happen, but when it happened, I was like, oh, that makes sense. And I'm sure going back and rereading, I'm going to be like, ooh, that's when he started pointing out this, and you don't really notice. Or you do, because you're super smart. But I loved that. I think that that makes the story feel cohesive. I love mysteries, so of course I'm going to be very interested in that type of writing. But I think that he handled it really well here in a way that was so fun. And I just think that's really cool. Something I have to remember about this kind of story and stories like it is that sometimes people don't appreciate YA stories, especially where young girls going on adventures are involved. I think that you might not think this is a very relatable story, but I am not a 16-year-old, and this story changed me. It was there for me. It was nice and sweet, and it was definitely cozy. It wasn't this deep, high fantasy tale, but it doesn't mean it can't still be good and special and enjoyable for all ages. I'm a huge advocate for reading YA. Even where I read a lot of adult stuff, I think there's something really special in YA stories. And for these particular characters, some, like, majority of the side characters are adults, but you're just reading about the 16-year-old. And so there really is a chance for you to find a character you relate to or a plotline you appreciate. And it might help you connect with a younger part of yourself. I think that kind of is what happened for me in reading Tress, her character. And I don't know, I really like that part of YA. It's just, when it's done right, and middle grade fiction as well, when it's done right, and it often is, we just don't, I think, give it the credit that it deserves, or can't admit that just because we aren't the target audience doesn't mean that it is not good enough or that it shouldn't exist. I think there's this weird highbrow view of YA, and I felt that way too about some things, but this just, it's good. It's good writing. It's beautiful. It doesn't need to be insane or grim to be good, you know, or to be realistic. I would argue that as well. I think a lot of this, yes, it is kind of like a fairy tale, but I think it's like, sometimes when characters in grimdark exist, it's like, people are like, that's just more realistic. It's like, sometimes, in an apocalyptic world maybe, but like, sometimes it's not, and it's still valid, and a lot of us aren't going to experience the insanity of something like Mistborn. And I don't think any one of us are really going to experience Tress's adventure. You know, a sea made of spores. But I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense or if I'm just rambling, but I think that, like, I can really appreciate the YA target here without feeling like I was left out of it as an adult. So, and it's not just because I'm a woman either. I appreciate a lot of adult stories, but this one in particular is an adult, but it has a lot of heart in it and a lot of wisdom I think adults can benefit from. Something that I like that this story addresses is people's interests and the things that they like and how that kind of makes them special, and not because they're trying too hard or they have a secret past that led them to this thing that they're passionate about. Sometimes we just like things, and I think as I've gotten older, this is actually a really good message for the YA audience. I think we have a tendency when we're getting into our teenage years, like when you're 5, you might know a lot about sharks, like an excessive amount about one thing. I think that happens to a lot of kids. Whether or not you're neurodivergent, I think that that is common. You find an obsession or great interest in something, and you learn a lot about it. I think there's a little switch when you get into your teenage years. You might feel like it's lame to be obsessed with something that isn't what everyone else is obsessing with. And when you get into adulthood, it's kind of freeing. You can just appreciate things and find people who like your weird niche. Like, I realize I love bluegrass music, and my friends at work don't really, but because we're grown-ups and we're respectful, we support each other in that, and it's cool to have an interest. And some people just like things, and you don't need a deep backstory for it. I like that for characters, and that's another thing that I think middle grade and YA fiction do really well. I actually think middle grade does it excellently because these kids are obsessed with things and very knowledgeable and have very specific quirks and hobbies. And a lot of adults in fiction are a little bit more general. I feel like they don't have specific quirks and hobbies because we're dealing with larger world stuff. But sometimes you lose a bit of that special character work because we're focused on world building or this major character arc. But in Tress, I think she has a really beautiful character arc, but she also likes collecting cups. And it's not for any specific reason. You know, she just likes cups. I think that that is just special to note that about people, that it's really cool to learn about people's interests. I love seeing my friends be passionate about something that I care nothing about because it's just cool and you gotta learn something about them. I also appreciate how Sanderson wrote a character who mixes it up a little bit and thinks through things and is smart and practical. They talk about that quite a bit, how they handle certain tropes of young people going on adventures, that she is logical about it, that she has support in certain areas that a lot of characters on adventures don't. And it just kind of felt like the concept of moving out of your house and experiencing life for the first time, you know? Which was cool. And the way she handles everything, I really appreciate. I think that's what a lot of people can appreciate about this character. So if you're worried about it being for a younger audience, I would not stress. Because she is not like, you're not slapping her forehead at everything she does. I don't know, I think it is nice to read a character like that. So when the stakes are high, you kind of get the sense that it's because they are intense, not because of stupid reasons. So that's kind of what I got from that. I would also say, along with this, if you're going to make a character good and kind, I would throw in a little bit of competence. Because I think where people who like grim, dark stories think that they're accurate is that these characters aren't like, everything's going to be fine, I'm going to be okay. They're like, no, crap's gonna happen. Things are gonna go down. And we're gonna have to solve this problem, and we're not gonna have somebody just here to save us, or, you know, it's not gonna be easy. But a realistic character who can appreciate the hard work it takes can still exist in a happy story and be positive in the sense that things might not work out, but I'm going to try my best. And it's not just because they're good, but their goodness definitely helps, if that makes sense. So, good and kind can get you so far, but I would, you know, with a character who needs to defeat great odds, competence can also get them farther. So, now I have one spoiler thing that's not from the end of the book or any of the later twists, turns, and events. It's something that happens at the beginning, and it's about one particular character. And if you really don't want to know anything, turn away. It's totally fine. I'd love for you to come back later, hear what I have to say. But this is a pretty fluffy discussion point for me. It's not major spoilery as far as the events go, just as far as the reading experience was for me. So if you're okay with something that's mentioned fairly early on, that is implied, that you might have gotten the gist of the first few chapters-ish, then maybe stick around. But if you just want absolutely no spoilers and just want to experience it on your own for the first time, then go for it. But I'm going to be talking about this thing, and I was thankful that I was not spoiled about it when I read it, so I'm going to give you guys like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So, Hoyd, he is our beloved wit. He's the narrator of this story, and the fact that I didn't get that is fine for me, because all I had heard was that it felt like Sanderson's writing had improved greatly for this book. It felt like he heard any criticism of his writing and then was like, no, I got it. This is something, and I didn't mention this earlier and I could have, but yes, this book is very funny. A lot of people have said if you don't like Sanderson's humor, you might not like this book. I would disagree. I feel like where Shalon makes a joke and it's not as funny as I think she wants it to be, this was different. I actually thought this was genuinely funny, and I don't always like vibe with the humor of someone like Shalon, but at the same time, I'm more in the middle. I'm not annoyed by it at all, really. I think she's still endearing, and I see where she's trying to be funny because she's also broken. But when it comes to these characters in this book, I thought the humor landed pretty well. So not only is Hoyd the narrator, but he is also along for part of this adventure, and a lot of him existing is quite funny and how it's handled. But honestly, Hoyd telling me a story was exactly what I needed. The story opens with Tress's regular life on her home island, where nobody can leave because of the deadly spores out on the ocean. People aren't allowed to leave. And she has a pretty regular home life viewed through a lens of humor and sort of peacefulness, in the same way you might see Hobbiton or something like that. Like, it's not the best, it's a very dangerous place to live, but it's simple, and that's just the life she's known. She's in love with this boy, and they're like best friends. And I felt like the special part of this for me is that it's not just a humorous voice, but through the humor there's a tenderness for this place and these people, and especially for Tress. And I had actually been so impressed with Sanderson's writing up to this beginning point that I hadn't even considered that the narrator was Hoyd. I just thought he took on a more whimsical writing style and a more storyteller. Like, you'd think I would have thought about it, but I didn't. And then I'm reading, and then I text my sister, I'm like, Hoyd! Of course it's him! The style reminds me a lot of Neil Gaiman or Terry Pratchett, as Sanderson sort of references, looking for that kind of voice and inspiration from their works, like Good Omens. But I would even say, after reading Series of Unfortunate Events, it gives me a bit of a Lemony Snicket vibe, but a little less silly, I would honestly say. What satire does for me, or at least well thought out, multi-dimensional satire, it can deliver a lot of heart in a light and funny box. I tend to joke during serious moments, and it's not the healthiest of coping mechanisms, but it does make me feel better, and I think that's sort of what this story does in some ways. Good jokes and stories don't behave like I feel like Marvel does, where it's a serious moment and it's ruined by a joke. I feel like a lot of the time there are jokes, things wind down, and then there's this little tender moment in there. What this story does, as well as others like it, is deliver a funny tale, observing the world as it is seen. It feels kind of honest. The world is in constant irony, if you look at it. People are constantly in contrast with the world and events around them and each other, and it's very entertaining if you look at it a certain way. I think of political comics in newspapers. You'll see it's a funny little joke, it's a little jab at so-and-so, or a serious issue, but it's handled with lightness, and it's almost like the vessel through which the point is delivered makes it more appetizing. I really like that about humorous writing and about satire, and especially about this book. And it often can not only call out a certain thing, but put it in a way that's so nonsensical or humorous that you're just like, even regular life looks a little bit silly when you take a step back and observe it. And many things in satire like this don't need to be said directly. If you're smart about your readers, you know that they are smart and that they're going to put things together. But what humor and satire can do amidst funny observations and call-outs is make you feel safe and comfortable with the author or the voice, just in time for them to hit you with something thoughtful, profound, or even just simple and wise. And for some reason, I trust that. I'm receptive to that. I'm very open to those soft moments being delivered after a light joke. I mean, if you joke around with someone, if you get along with them, if you're in good humor with them, when they say something more serious, I think the way we listen to each other, to our friends that way, it hits harder, than someone who is serious and dark all the time, The contrast is there. And not only that, but like, those soft, honest thoughts come from light and funny, honest thoughts, That just is the way it is. This is how people are. But also, in a serious sense, this is how people are, and we love people. I think of things like, I love the show Fleabag. I'm actually quite into that show again, like thinking about it a lot lately. And there are scenes where there's a joke happening, or characters are being stupid or funny, and then someone says a line and it just like breaks my heart. And I think that couldn't have been done without the humor that came before it. And I think a narrator like Hoyd, he says what he sees. He points out the fools, the flaws, the villains, and the cowards. And so when he points out something beautiful or brilliant, it's also going to be true. Because a lot of humor is honest. And I don't mean the people who are like, it's just a joke, or I'm just being honest. But I think good humor can maybe poke fun at things with the knowledge that we're going to go home and we're all going to be stupid idiots, and we can just recognize this particular stupid idiot for a second. But then the way Hoyd looks at everybody is like they all do and say maybe some dumb things or some silly things. But in the end, most of them are well-intentioned, or they have these good qualities. And it's just like, if I'm able to be like, I have this particular flaw, you'll probably believe me when I say you can rely on me in this other area. Because I'm going to be honest about the good and the bad. So when you hear about these practical and good and brave and sweet things about Tress, you believe Hoyd. And you feel like you know her and you care about her, like a friend. And then you laugh along the way with her. It's just the same as when he speaks to sorrow and pain and joy and a love of a thing or a craft. I mean, I don't personally love weapons, but the character who loves weapons, I'm like, I get it. I get it in my own way. I get these things in my own specific world, because you get an honest and sweet and non-judgmental view of a lot of these people. I'm kind of getting all boring and sappy about it. So this is why I can't really give a review. Obviously, I've analyzed satire a little bit. I couldn't get away without doing that, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized why I like writing like that so much. The one Terry Pratchett book I read had so much cleverness to it that I felt endeared toward the author and the voice, and I wanted to listen more. And so the serious moments, or the thoughtful moments, hit harder, and they didn't need to try more, because they set it up, and then it's just presented to you, and you're trusted with it, and you don't need to be condescended to. You just know what it is because it's human experience. And I think I needed something fluffy. I will say the world building is still cool. I'm still very fascinated by this world and the events that take place. If you haven't read any Cosmere thing, I think you can still read it. It's a great place to start, and you can still enjoy the story, but there are points where you're like, if you've read the Cosmere and you know decent enough about Hoyd and different magic systems and types of powers people have and races of people, you're going to catch snippets. But for me, I didn't care too much about those. It was exciting to talk about with people, but more than anything, this was the story that I needed. It's a bit like Kaladin or Shallan when Wit shows up to offer them comfort or courage. That world-hopping idiot kind of swooped in when I needed him in my life. I can't really critique it, because nothing else matters than that this is a story I needed in my life arc right now. And it was there when I needed to be whisked away on an adventure and also feel like I can grow and change and have a good life, and that I'm not alone, and that there's people like Tress who do these amazing things, and there's people like us who can also do those amazing things. And I don't know, that's my sappy thing, is that this was the story I needed, and I'm really thankful to Brandon Sanderson for putting it out there and sharing it with us. Before I totally lose it, I think I'm gonna sign off with, read this book. I highly recommend it. It was very good. Thanks to Hoyd for making me care so much, and for being such a lovely, annoying, and entertaining character. For being wise and terrifying, and then going on this adventure just so I could read about it. I know he's not real. I recognize that. But I think this is one I'm just dying to have, the hardcover. The physical copy in any form. And I will be returning to this one. It's a new comfort read for me, and it's very high on my favorite book list as of right now. I'll have to reread it and let you guys know what I think again, but I don't think that's gonna change. So yeah, if you're looking for something that's gonna be there for you and gonna be silly and fun and adventurous, I do recommend this one. And this is why I read books at the end of the day. It's because it's good for me and it makes me feel better and feel happy. I really appreciate any of you who watched. I recognize that there was that spoilery bit. anyone who comes back or sticks around or whatever. Just appreciate you guys being here on my channel and all your support and your fun comments. If you had a favorite part in Tress, I'd love to hear about it. Make sure you give a little bit of spoiler warning and maybe some space before you continue your actual comment. But I want to talk about it with people. I want to know what you think, and I'm okay if you didn't like it, because I think that obviously I loved it in a very subjective, emotional way. So I can respect if someone else didn't, but what a great book, and what a fun surprise. Secret Project #1 has been read, and I love it, and I'm excited to read it again and have the actual copy in my possession. So thank you guys. You're all wonderful, and you all deserve beautiful adventures and manageable character arcs. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, whatever it is, and I will see you guys again later with another video. Thank you for watching.